Hey everyone, welcome to the Dirt Trail Running Podcast. I'm Coach Loretta. I'm here with Coach Lindsay, and today we have a special guest, Shannon O'Grady from Gnarly. She is the CEO. We've had her on a few times before, and she's a super big wealth of knowledge, and I'm super excited to have her here so we can talk today about protein and creatine, all of those good things to help support us as athletes and humans. So welcome, Shannon.
Oh, thanks for so much for having me, Loretta and Lindsay. I'm really excited to be here. I always love talking nutrition to your audience.
Yay, for sure. And I always think it's intriguing because you also do jujitsu. So that's an interesting piece about Shannon too. I follow that a little bit, the things that you're doing.
Yeah, I started as an ultra runner. As an ultra triathlete, as I've done Ironman, I've done 100-mile mountain bike races, 200-mile road bike races. I've run a 50, so I'm a little bit all over the place in terms of interests across the course of my life. But I've found jujitsu about 10 years ago, and it ended up being that thing for me. So I still love getting out in the trails, and I still definitely run on a weekly basis, but that's where the majority of my time is spent.
Yeah,
I
that's
love
cool.
it.
So, and
Yeah.
I've been working, having gnarly products. Geez, I don't even know how long now, 5 or 6 years I've probably been using gnarly. The creatine, the protein, the hydrate is probably one of my favorites. So,
Yeah, it's great this time of year especially, but it's good for electrolyte replacement. I also tell people it seems like there's a division in the population. Either you're a water drinker or you need maybe something with a little bit of flavor to encourage hydration throughout the course of the
Yeah.
day. And I think hydrate in a diluted form can be that for a lot of people. It tastes so great. And obviously, it's going to help you a little bit with electrolyte intake over the course of the day. We don't need that much every day unless we're sweating a ton on a regular basis. But I like to add maybe half of a dose of hydrate, and it just encourages me to keep drinking. So I'm up on my daily hydration, which is critical.
yeah,
I
so
love that.
definitely much easier for me because I don't do very well with water, but I always like it when you guys have new flavors that are like limited flavors. The apple was really good, apple cider, I think. It was really good. I love the peach and
Oh,
raspberry. It's like my all-time favorite.
Well, we just came out with a new one. We did kind of a soft launch about a month ago, and we're gonna be leaning into it a little more in the next month, but it's a cherry limeade and it's
oh,
probably my favorite yet. So you'll have to check
Okay.
that one out.
I'll have to
I
check that
love
out.
cherry
Nice.
lemonade.
That's
Yeah,
good.
so for anyone that doesn't know gnarly or not super familiar with it, do you want to kind of just give us a little bit of rundown about what it is and kind of a little bit about the brand?
Sure. Yeah, we've been around for almost 12 years now. It feels crazy to say that. We are all about making great tasting products that consumers can trust. And when
Hmm.
I say trust, both in terms of how the product's used and how the product's formulated
Hmm.
relative to that use. But also, we use third-party certification. So our products are NSF content certified, which means that they're tested for label claim. So what is on the label is what is actually in the product.
Hmm.
They're also tested for pesticides and contaminants like heavy metals and microbes. And then a selection of our products, it's the top selling products in every category, are NSF or sport tested, which means that they're tested for all, I think it's over 300 now, banned substances on the World Anti-Doping Agency banned substances list. So,
Yeah.
that's important for us,
Yeah.
hobbyist athletes, I think. But it also then allows pro athletes and teams like, we sell to the LA Dodgers, for instance,
Mm.
to use our products and not fear that they're going to, get positively tested for a prohibited substance. So
Right.
we really believe in those. We make everything from hydration, as we were talking about, protein, creatine, pre-workout, a greens blend. We have great baseline products that might be interesting if somebody's worried about how their everyday nutrition
Mhm.
could be contributing not just to sports performance, but also overall health, things like
Mhm.
iron and vitamin D, omega-3 fatty acids, magnesium. So a little bit of everything.
I love that.
And I love it. So I also use your magnesium. And one thing I really like about your magnesium is the dose is a little bit higher per tablet than a lot of places that I can find. And I always have low magnesium. So being able to use those and not have to take as many, I really like that.
I love.
Yeah. And one thing I think a lot of people also forget about magnesium, I mean, you hear a lot of folks talking in the terms of needing it to take for improvement of sleep, and that's really more about the form of magnesium you're taking, and not necessarily the magnesium itself. But one of the main reasons I take magnesium is that it's critical for activation of vitamin D. So most folks are deficient in vitamin D if we kind of live the regular 9 to 5 lifestyle,
Right.
because we're not outside when the UVB rays, which are really important for making vitamin D in our skin,
Yeah.
are around. And so secondarily, like that is critical. And then the majority of folks are also deficient in magnesium just because magnesium levels have declined in the soil. And
Right.
so really the two go hand in hand. And if you're supplementing with vitamin D, you should also consider supplementing with magnesium for that reason.
Ooh, that's
Got it.
interesting because I absolutely am low in both of those. I live in the Midwest. We don't get much sun and
Yeah.
always low in vitamin D and magnesium.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
but through the supplementation, I have gotten my levels up and I'm doing much better. So,
Oh, that's great.
yeah.
I kind of had a little bit of a question, and you just touched on it briefly, but I've always wanted to ask somebody, so maybe you're the right person here. The NSF certified for sport that you do for your top selling products. I always am curious because you see, when athletes get busted, they always blame, the product. Like that's always a thing.
Yes.
How prevalent is this? Is this a thing like we all should be worried about? Like, what's the deal with this? Like, obviously it's something we should be concerned about, but like, is this really happening a lot that things are contaminated with things that we should be, concerned?
I mean, they've done studies where they've looked at supplements and found like 60 to 70% are contaminated with substances that aren't on the label or shouldn't be in the product.
Hmm.
Typically, those types of studies are done with things like pre-workouts
Yeah.
that contain or people look to for stimulants or
Yeah.
stimulation, right?
Right.
So I don't think the contamination would be as high in something like a protein powder or a hydration drink mix. I think there are definitely product classes that are more prone to contamination
Got it.
than others. So I'll say that. Secondarily, I've noticed the same thing. Yeah, you see a lot of pro athletes, they get busted and they blame the supplement. The pro athletes that I work with are so strict about the supplements that they take. They
Right.
will only take products that are NSF for sport tested.
Yeah.
And when a product is NSF for sport tested, it is lot specific testing. So those athletes also will double check that the lot is actually listed on the NSF for sports site. So whenever I see a pro athlete blame a supplement they're taking, I take that with a grain of salt
Yeah.
because the ones that I work with would never take a supplement that isn't tested.
Right.
They go that extra mile to even make sure that the lot that they've been delivered is tested. So
Right.
that's my 2 cents.
Because I mean, like, because even as far as like Loretta and I go, like we met where she got first place and I got second place, and like we are not professional athletes by any means, but there are situations where we could win and have to get tested, and it's always like my worst nightmare of like, it's kind of the fear of getting like put in jail for your taxes done wrong or something. Like, so I do always look for the NSF certified things, but it's always like this like fear in the back of my head, like what if, because like you hear it all the time, like that's always the
Mhm.
go-to, my supplement was tainted, and I'm like, are we just out here tainting every supplement?
Yeah, I mean, I think like once again, like if you're taking a product like a pre-workout that has stimulants in it,
Yeah.
whether or not it was intentional by the brand or the
Mhm.
manufacturer or the raw material that that brand or manufacturer purchased happens to be tainted, like I think those two situations with that particular class of products
Hmm.
um, could be likely. So I'd say
Okay.
even more critical if you're the type of person that takes a pre-workout is to look
Mhm.
for something that's third party certified.
Got it. Sounds good. Yeah, I noticed, like, I mean, I don't take a pre-workout, but I remember them being like massively popular, like maybe 10 years ago or something. I don't really hear a ton about them now, but I guess some people still really rely on them and like that, like extra like stimulant.
Yeah, I mean, similarly to what I was saying about water with a little flavor, I feel like coffee versus taking a pre-workout. So
Yeah,
I tend to be more of a coffee drinker. My
same. Yeah,
husband prefers a pre-workout before he trains. I
got
think
it.
both of them kind of can help, clear the cobwebs from your eyes and get you focused on what you're about to do. And like our pre-workout definitely contains some ingredients that are going to have a positive impact on the
Mhm.
training you're about to do, whether that's through endurance or whether that's through recovery. So they have their benefits, but definitely do your homework and make sure you're taking a
Yeah,
good one.
got it. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, Lindsay.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about protein. It's obviously an important part when we're athletes and making sure we're recovering and, building muscle. Do you have a recommendation of about the amount of protein that someone should be taking in? And also, let's talk a little bit about timing and how we can use a protein powder versus actually using real food, when we need to.
Yeah, so I feel like the recommendations have been all over the
Yes.
place in
Mhm.
the past few years. And I've seen more recently some scientists actually in the protein space try to consolidate that information and be a little bit more clear. And so from what I've seen, I think it is crystal clear that anything over 1.5 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilo of body weight doesn't have appreciable benefits for an individual. I've even seen some researchers go as low as the 1.2 grams per kilo as far of a recommendation. I think we are a society that likes to fixate on things and kind of go nuts with it, and that's where we are, in the protein space.
Yeah.
And I think it goes to the point where people start getting um, almost like overly focused on their food. And that's coming from someone who works in the nutrition space. But food and nutrition should be something that you enjoy and something that brings joy and nutrition and good things to your life. And I think
Mhm.
overly fixating on one thing to the point where it causes stress.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not getting enough protein. I need to get more protein in my diet. I'm going to start eating like protein and desserts and protein and cereal and protein, I'm not a big fan of that.
Yeah.
So I can't remember off the top of my head what the per kilo to per pound conversion is, but if
Mhm.
you take your weight and you divide it by 2.2, that's going to put your weight in kilograms. And then
Mhm.
if you take your weight in kilograms and you multiply it by 1.5 to 1.6, I think that's a good high end level. Get as close to that as you can. In terms of how we should consume that total amount of protein, so most of the research shows that hitting that total amount of protein is the most critical thing. So we need to make sure we're getting in a good amount of protein per day. If we can divide that more consistently across the day, that is wonderful.
Mhm.
But if your lifestyle is one that leads to a protein high breakfast and a protein high dinner, that's okay too. Like, do not stress about it. Once again, it's the total protein intake that is really the thing to focus on and do the best you can. But for athletes that are extremely active, the 1.5, 1.6 is kind of what research is showing is the ceiling in terms of benefit, even for those on caloric deficits. So obviously, if we're trying to change our body composition or lose some weight, our body doesn't really discriminate between muscle and fat. So you're in a calorie deficit, your body is burning the tissue that it has on board.
Mhm.
And so having slightly higher protein intakes during a caloric deficit can help in a couple of ways. Protein is slightly more satiating, so it might help you feel more full, but
Mhm.
also it might help us maintain more of the muscle that we have instead of losing it when our body is trying to make up for that caloric deficit by burning tissue. So
Right.
definitely hitting that 1.5, 1.6 when we're in a caloric deficit, potentially going a little higher can also be beneficial in terms of helping us keep muscle and burn more fat.
Got it. Is
So
there
what
any
about
sort of Oh, go ahead, Loretta.
I was say, what about using like something like Gnarly, your protein? Talk to us a little bit about that. Is there some timing, like after a workout, that we want to make sure we're getting that protein in?
Yeah, so I think for a long time people were, you know, focused, myself included, on that, getting it in within an hour.
Hmm.
That also has changed a little bit. And once again, the total amount of protein you're taking over the course of the day is the most important thing. Um, if you can make sure that around your workout, whether it be before you start or after you start or after you finish, you're getting key amino acids in your body from essential amino acids, whether it's from food or from a protein powder, that can actually help with recovery. So that's where products, like we had branched chain amino acids in our line, we've transitioned those to essential amino acids. So as opposed to just having the 3 BCAAs, we have now the 9 essential amino acids. For folks that can't have protein right before they're going to go for a big run, that's often really heavy on your stomach. Having circulating amino acids in your system can actually help with the delayed onset muscle soreness we feel later. But
Mm.
if that's not an option, obviously also trying to get in that protein after you train, whenever is convenient for you, is also a really good way to make sure your body has what it needs to recover. But this idea of trying to get it in right after you train or you're not going to benefit, that's also kind of gone out the window as people have more critically looked at the research that's been done and are starting to do new studies asking more specific questions.
Ooh,
Yeah.
that's good
That's,
information.
yeah, that's really helpful. On the other side of things, is there any downside to, other than driving yourself crazy, is there any downside to having too much protein? Can it cause any sort of issues?
I mean, they've done studies with extremely high levels of protein, and folks always, I think, are concerned about kidney function.
Hmm.
It would have to be like insane levels of protein for that actually to be an issue. For
Yeah,
me, what I always think about is like, are we including something so much at the cost of excluding other things?
right.
So if you are focusing so much on protein that especially as an endurance athlete, you're not getting enough carbohydrates. I
Hmm.
think if we're talking about timing around training, carbohydrate timing is like more critical than
Right.
protein timing, both around training and within training. So are you getting high quality carbohydrates that your body needs to support the running that you're doing? Are you getting the carbohydrate your body needs to replenish glycogen stores? Are you
Hmm.
getting those complex carbohydrates your body needs to help support healthy digestive function and to give your body the vitamins and minerals it needs to function properly?
Yeah.
And then even, there are essential fats that we need. So I think when people are eating so much protein, what I start thinking about is what they're excluding.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And you touched on it just a second there. I mean, we've just been in this endurance space. You hear all these theories like my whole life of like what works, what doesn't, and all that. But you touched on the glycogen storages. And I've always heard, being a woman runner, that's kind of the woman advantage in the endurance space. Is it true that women can hold more glycogen storage because of our fat content than men in general, or is that kind of a myth?
So I guess, what do you mean by because of our fat content?
I've always kind of heard like, and I don't know the science behind like how we store glycogen. I've kind of heard that like women might be able to store a little bit more in their bodies. I don't know if it's stored in a fat system or something, or if that's kind of like just a theory. But how does like where do we store glycogen? Do women have an advantage? Can we store more? What's kind of the thing there?
Yeah, so to start with where glycogen is stored in our muscles and our liver.
Okay.
And so, you know, uh, liver storage of glycogen is critical for keeping blood glucose levels high.
Hmm.
Muscle glycogen storage is almost like it's right next to your mitochondria. So it's like
Hmm.
quick use, you're using
Got
it
it.
fast We use liver glycogen when we're sleeping, for instance. Like I always tell people to think about that, evening time as an overnight fast. That's why breakfast is called breakfast, because you're breaking your fast. And so for folks that exercise first thing in the morning, myself included, like trying to get something, if it's not critical for shorter workouts necessarily, because you still have that muscle glycogen, but if you're running over 60 to 90 minutes, trying to get something in your body ahead of time, or during your running, starting fueling early is critical, because you will be low on glycogen from that overnight fast. That's true for men and women. So given that, like talking about gender differences, the amount of glycogen you store is really going to be dependent on your body size and the amount of muscle you have.
Got it.
Just in terms of space to store that carbohydrate, but obviously body size also might mean you need more glycogen. So I'm not saying it's not there, but I haven't come across anything showing glycogen storage differences that account for body size differences between males and females. What I have seen is there is some research showing that women might be slightly better at fat oxidation. So when we're running, we use both fat and carbohydrate as fuel. The proportion of those two fuels differs depending on zone and intensity. So lower intensity or lower zone running, like your zone 2 training, is going to be more dependent on fat. And then as we increase intensity, and we need more oxygen to deal with those higher intensity runs, that's when we get a mixture of aerobic and anaerobic metabolism. And that's when carbohydrate becomes a more important fuel. So there is research showing that women are slightly better at fat oxidation. And this has been kind of purported to be possibly one of the reasons that you see the gender gap minimize when we go into longer distance races, right? Like the woman that just won outright Cocodona 250, or also looking at Courtney DeWalter, who has done amazing for a really long period of time and been placing up against, male ultra runners and shattering female course records. But yeah, that is that's specific to fat oxidation and not necessarily glycogen use. So that's the only gender difference I'm aware of. But
got it.
Yeah,
it's so fascinating. I could ask a million questions.
it is super fascinating. I've always found that really interesting, and often wondered. You always kind of think about, or I always think about it evolutionarily, like why do we see that difference? Because women tend to store more fat on our body as well. And it could be something to do with that fat storage, with obviously not all women have children, but being able to have a child and the importance of that fat store, and during breastfeeding producing nutrition and being able to tap into those fat stores, like having different oxidative capacities than men. I'm not really sure, but whenever I see differences like that, my brain is thinking like evolutionarily, like why would that occur?
Yeah, women are so incredible. Okay, one more question. I'm sure we'll switch to creatine, but you also just touched on, the importance of carbohydrates and all that, and using that as fuel. Is there a big problem with the keto situation and endurance runners using it? Like, is that a terrible idea when you're going to run 100 miles in the race, eating keto, which I know people do, and then prior and after? Like, is there a big problem there?
So I will preface this by saying that different strokes for different folks. So what I'm about to say is my personal opinion based on the research that I've read. I think that the majority of racers that I've come across that are keto athletes still race on carbohydrates. When it comes to performance, they're not using a keto diet during those A races. They might be on a low carbohydrate diet for training, and that low carbohydrate diet for training is to help them really tap into those fat burning capabilities. more so than they would be able to if they were consuming more carbohydrates during that training. And there is some research supporting that you can increase your ability to burn fat if you are running either fasted or on low carbohydrate. But once again, that is very low intensity running. Like when you are running higher intensities at higher heart rates, you cannot physiologically cannot burn high levels of fat. It doesn't matter what diet you're on. It's not possible. So when those same athletes then are looking to really put their foot on the gas pedal, they consume carbs. Like we used to work with an athlete, Mike McKnight, who ran 100 miles on 0 calories. I mean, insane. But he would, and it was fair. It was flat. It was a flat run, but it was fairly fast. I want to say he did it in like under.
Oh, froze a little bit.
Yep.
Come back.
Yeah, you guys are frozen, I'm sure.
Oh, there we go.
You were frozen for a second too, but okay, we're back.
That's the example I always give people is that even someone to that extreme, and I'm not saying that people should go out and do that, but he is an extreme example. He's a keto athlete. He tends towards the carnivore diet, or at least used to. He's done crazy runs like that. He does a lot of low carb, fasted training, but when he's trying to perform, he consumes carbohydrates.
Got it.
So let's kind of switch to the opposite end. There's a big push for consuming a lot more carbs. We're seeing some pretty extreme levels in more pro athletes of the amount of carbs, but we're also seeing that in some of the products are switching to higher carb content. And it's always a kind of a question for me when, I'm coaching a lot of athletes that might be mid to back of the pack 100 milers, 50 milers, and then they're hearing that more carbs, more carbs, more carbs. But then I'm thinking in my head, you're running in that low zone, 2, zone 1 versus some of the pros are pushing that pace and they're burning through those carbs a lot quicker than maybe somebody that's moving slower. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that always kind of feels like it's a mixed message to people. Like, okay, I have to have all the carbs, but then I'm like, do you really need all those carbs?
Yeah. And what's the number? And like, what is the gram? Like, I hear so many different things. Like, what's the gram per hour of carb that we're supposed to be consuming?
Well, and I take issue with, and I'm not saying you said it, Lindsay, but I take issue with the supposed to be consuming.
Yeah.
And I do feel like some folks in that higher carb camp are pretty clear about this is not something that everyone should do, and very clear about the amount of training. And when I say training, I'm not talking running training, but stomach training about digestive system training that they have done prior to instituting that higher carb intake. So someone like David Roche studied competitive eaters to determine how he could get his body to actually adapt to taking in and absorbing that many carbohydrates. So I think where the baby gets thrown out with the bathwater is that you can't make that jump just because these pro athletes are doing it from, let's say you as an athlete are consuming like 60 to 80 grams of carbohydrate per hour, which is going to be like 240 to 320 calories. And then all of a sudden you hear that David Roche set some course record consuming 500 to 600 calories per hour. Like if you make that jump, you will have a lot of gut upset and digestive issues and will probably not follow your race. So to your point, Loretta, I think that looking at the intensity that you're training at, the intensity that you're planning on racing at, where you are now with carbohydrate intake, and potentially what is and is not working for you. So are you running into problems during your race that indicate that the carbohydrate you're getting in your current training and racing strategy isn't enough? Or is that not really the problem? Are there other problems related to fitness that are really what's holding you back? And if you determine that it is the carbohydrate that is potentially leading to these problems getting in the way of you hitting your race goals, then slowly inching up those carbohydrates, both in terms of quantity and in terms of type. So making small jumps and seeing how those small jumps make you feel and what foods are the best for you to use in order to get in that totally calorie intake. It's that piece that I think a lot of people are missing.
Yeah.
And I think much like everything, it takes work, and often when things take work and time, folks aren't interested
want
in
to do
that
it.
piece of
Right.
it.
Yeah,
I had an
exactly.
athlete ask me a question. So has been doing a lot of gut training and, taking in probably around 90 grams of carbs per hour, training for 100K. But she asked me the question, like, at what point is it really beneficial? Like, am I just wasting all of my money buying all of these gels that I don't even really need that much because of, the intensity at which I'm going to race in?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think 90 grams per hour is totally reasonable. That's
Okay.
under 400 calories.
Yep.
The average racer, I mean, I'm just taking, is going to burn 500 to 600 calories per hour. So even at, let's just round up and say, even at 400 calories, you're potentially still at a 100 to 200 calorie per hour
Okay.
deficit that's
Yeah.
going to build over the course of a 100K or 60-mile run.
Um,
So to me, that's a moderate from the numbers I've seen.
yes. Oh,
90
for sure.
grams is moderate.
For sure.
And so, yes, I would say that that is a worthwhile pursuit.
Okay.
Okay.
But at some point, she needs to determine whether or not she's seeing the benefit. Obviously, it is a twofold kind of answer, both in terms of
Mhm.
are the carbohydrates you're taking allowing you to do the training that's going to
Mhm.
increase your fitness to hit your race goals. So
Yeah.
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 um
And I think the
it
answer is absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
she's feeling it out there. She's feeling really
yeah
good, even energy in her training runs and, consistently training her gut so she's ready for this race with it. But then she started questioning, I'm spending a lot of money on products. Do I need all of this?
Yeah, I mean, you know what? There are some pretty cool recipes out there for homemade gels
Yes.
that she should check out. But yeah, it can be expensive.
Right.
I mean, I make sports nutrition products, so I know.
Yeah.
But if especially if you look at how many gels you would consume over a longer distance race, it
So
can
many.
Right.
be
Right.
pricey.
Yeah.
So I want to switch back to protein just really quick, because I get this question a lot too. Again, I do think people are obsessed with protein, and sometimes I can even be lean on that side, like got my protein in, but I just didn't have time for anything else. Like, it's like it's hard to do that. But a lot of question people have, and it's typically those people that are also focused a bit on body composition is how many protein shakes a day is too much? If I'm not getting the real food, is it okay if I'm doing 3 protein shakes a day or whatever? And I always try to encourage them to also get food, but what is the take on that, for people that are busy and just really wanting to get that in?
Yeah, I mean, food first is definitely what I go by, but we are all busy. Like this morning, between getting my kids to school and trying to get my stuff ready for the day, I didn't have enough time to make a good breakfast. And so
Mhm.
instead of just living on the coffee that I had, I grabbed a quick protein shake.
Mhm.
Life gets in the way sometimes, and it's a nice solution to that. I
Yeah.
think putting it in the context of body composition, um, once again, like calories are calories, whether you're getting them from, and when I say that, I mean within a macro group, whether you're getting them from your protein from a piece of fish or meat or a protein shake itself. Yes, there are differences in the other nutrition that you're getting, like
Mhm.
eating a piece of fatty fish, you're getting a lot of really good vitamins and minerals, you're getting essential fatty acids. So you are missing out on that.
Mhm.
But if we're talking about watching our calorie intake, if instead of having, 3 meals with lean sources of protein, you're having 3 protein shakes, it's
Mhm.
not going to be any harder for you to change your body composition. You just might be missing out on a lot of the other nutrients that you would be getting by choosing to get your protein through whole foods.
Yeah.
But like I said, life gets in the way. I will say that for me, the most important thing with making changes that are going to lead to body composition changes are making sure those changes are sustainable. And so often when you see people try to change their body composition, they make these extreme changes that aren't something that are, one, something they can sustain for a long time, or two, aren't changes that they should sustain for a long time to the betterment of their health. And this would be an instance where I would say, like, if you're having to consume 3 protein shakes a day to get your protein needs in, I'm not sure that that's a way that you should continue eating for the long term.
Yep.
So,
Right.
Yep.
so I guess,
Yes.
my answer is twofold.
Yep.
I think it's okay, but I also don't think it's something that you should
Sustainable.
Right,
do for
yep.
your health.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
I think that's so true. So, do you have any kind of a guideline? I know it's different based on the amount of work we're doing, whether we're doing 60 minutes of workout a day or we're doing a 3-hour run. I know that changes, but do you have a rule of thumb on guideline for the percentage for macros if we were going to break down, the carbs, the fat, and the protein, a good goal?
So that, like I said, the protein, I think, the more you train, the closer you should be to that 1.5 to 1.6 grams per kilo. If you're just getting in, if you're getting in an hour training a day, good for you. That's awesome. In that case, you don't necessarily have to be as like crazy about it. I think in the 1.3 to 1.4, you're still doing great. You're getting in enough protein that your body needs. But the more you train, I think the more you should try to get close to that 1.5 to 1.6. With carbohydrates, I want to say the more you train, the closer we should get. Like if you're training 2 to 3 hours a day regularly, looking at like 6 to 8 grams per kilo of carbohydrate, 6 to 8 grams of carbohydrate per kilo of body mass should be something you should consider, both in terms of I think carbohydrate training around your runs, but then also consistent carbohydrate intake during your runs. Obviously, much less than that, maybe the 3 to 5, the less that you're running. And then in terms of essential fats, I just think we should make sure we're getting our fats from healthy places in our diet. So eating fatty fish, avocados, olives, like these are all great, really nutrient dense foods where we're getting in good lean protein, we're getting in fat soluble vitamins, and then we're also getting in the essential fatty acids that our body needs.
Yeah, super helpful. Yeah, let's kind of talk about creatine. Like, I know that this has been around forever. I remember being a kid and like my dad and brother being obsessed with creatine. And it's kind of back then, I guess, like early 2000s was known to like put on like weight essentially, right? Or like, how have we become like now the creatine focused society? It's having this like massive boom right now, especially among women. And I take it. And I actually love it and feel great. But what's kind of happened in like the nutritional space to cause this like creatine boom? What are we seeing?
Yeah, so I feel like the creatine boom is like the sister to the protein boom.
Yeah.
And it's not a bad thing by any means.
Yeah.
I think especially as we age, the more muscle we can keep in our bodies, and this is true for males and females, but particularly true for females, given the risk of things like osteoporosis. And I just think historically, women not being encouraged to put on and maintain muscle mass. It both making sure you're getting enough protein and the consumption of creatine, not by itself, but with a good resistance training program, can really help us keep muscle on. Keeping muscle on helps us move more. Moving more helps a number of things. It reduces the risk that we're going to fall later on in life. It can have a positive impact on the risk of osteoporosis, which has a direct connection with those falls and whether or not we break a bone. So I really think that those two things go hand in hand. Just to revisit your comment about putting on weight. So creatine in and of itself does not cause you to put on mass. What it does is similar to carbohydrate. When creatine is stored in our body, creatine is stored with water. So that's why, when people cut carbs, they initially lose weight. It's because they're losing water. Same thing with creatine. If you're on creatine and then you stop taking creatine, you're going to lose weight because you're losing water. So both of those substances cause an increase in the number we see on the scale, but it's not a body mass increase, it's a water weight increase. So that's important to note. You can also put on more muscle mass if you're taking creatine and you're doing resistance training. So creatine in and of itself will not increase your muscle mass, but creatine taken in the context of resistance training does. And that's because, just to kind of go through the mechanism for folks that don't understand or that haven't heard it, why it's beneficial for putting on muscle or helping us build muscle. Creatine is stored in our muscles as creatine phosphate. So we've talked a little bit about aerobic metabolism and anaerobic metabolism, and those are two pathways that help us generate ATP, but they're not the only pathways. So ATP is the energetic currency of our body. It's how our muscles do work. The one kind of the first line of ATP use is just stored ATP in our muscles, but that second source of ATP is through the creatine phosphagen system. So creatine stores that phosphate and it essentially just donates that phosphate to something called ADP, which is adenosine diphosphate. So it then takes that ADP takes that phosphate from creatine and it makes ATP or adenosine triphosphate. So it's this way for our body to make ATP extremely quickly. And that's why creatine, increasing our creatine stores through creatine supplementation, allows us to make more ATP, which allows us to create more force in short, powerful movements, which then helps us adapt to that training. So creatine doesn't build muscle on its own. It essentially provides us the energy to build that muscle if we're giving our muscles the correct stimulus, which is weightlifting. You can also think, though, not many of these studies have been done, and this is something that we've talked a lot about at Gnarly is like there are instances in trail running, there are instances in mountain biking, there are instances in lots of sports where maybe you're, running up a really steep slope or pedaling up a really steep slope, or even in jiu-jitsu, I'm pushing against someone that's really heavy. Like all of these motions require intense short bursts of muscular work. And you could imagine that in these cases, creatine would be helpful as well. So resistance training, I think, is important for us all to do. It's important to do if you are considering taking creatine for muscle mass. But I also think creatine supplementation can have more specific benefits in the sports that we love in terms of power dynamics. So I think that's an important thing to consider. Just for context, the average omnivore, the creatine stores in the average omnivore's muscles are about 60% saturated. So we get creatine from the meat that we eat in our diet. We can also produce a certain amount of creatine or synthesize creatine from amino acids in our diet. But getting it from our diet and synthesizing it from other amino acids only gets our muscles about 60% full of creatine. And that's where creatine supplementation comes in, is we're trying to go from that 60% level to that 100% level. And it's kind of filling in that gap where we see the performance benefit. Vegetarians and vegans are going to be at levels lower than an omnivore because they're not getting creatine from meat in their diet. And so vegetarians and vegans actually can benefit even more from creatine supplementation for that reason, because
Yeah.
their baseline levels are lower. I've always been curious to know what a carnivore's creatine intake or creatine saturation levels are, not creatine saturation, baseline creatine levels are based on the sheer amount of meat they eat in their diet. I haven't seen that number yet.
Yeah.
But it would be pretty hard to saturate your muscular creatine levels from food alone.
Yeah.
And that's why creatine supplementation is critical. It's also one of the safest supplements out there in terms of efficacy, probably has the most research behind it. So, when you heard about it when you were little, Lindsay, like the
Mhm.
research has been going on since
A
then,
lot.
and
Yeah.
they've done studies with people on excessive amounts of creatine for decades and haven't seen negative impacts. I
Yeah.
will say that if you are supplementing with creatine and you go into your doctor and you get a blood panel, your
Mhm.
doctor will come back to you and
Kidneys.
say, like, your creatinine levels are high. And potentially your glomerular, that's really hard to say, filtration rate is low. So I just kind of want to run through this really quickly. There's no research showing that creatine is bad for your kidneys.
Mhm.
Creatinine, just look at creatinine for a minute. If a person is not taking creatine and their creatinine levels are high,
Mhm.
that is an indicator of poor kidney function.
Mhm.
So it's something to pay attention to. But when you take creatine, or even when you have lots of muscle, or even when you eat a lot of meat in your diet, all three of those scenarios will lead to increased creatinine levels.
Mhm.
And so creatinine will go up for those reasons. And it doesn't mean that you're having kidney dysfunction.
Yeah.
Where you need to be aware is that if you have a history of kidney dysfunction, or someone in your family has kidney dysfunction and it could be genetic, if you're supplementing with creatine, potentially the increased creatinine would cover up that dysfunction.
Yeah.
So it is important to be aware of that fact, but creatinine levels going up as a function of creatine supplementation isn't something to be concerned
Yeah.
about unless you have kidney dysfunction in your family. Then it is 100% something to watch out for. In cases like that, I would recommend coming off of the creatine for a
Mhm.
month, having your levels retested. And when you come off of the creatine, if you see that creatinine level drop to a normal level, then you
Mhm.
know that it was only elevated because of the creatine supplementation. If those
Yeah.
creatinine levels stay high, even though you're off the creatine, then it's something to look at in terms of kidney functionality.
Yeah, that happened with one of my friends, but I tried to warn him. I'm like, look, you're taking creatine, like, because I had heard a doctor explain it, and I just find it so fascinating that that can be like a thing that happens. But it's super important to like tell people this so that they're not panicking and think they're dying if they weren't aware of of the what it can cause or show.
Yeah, I mean, I've been very surprised by even doctor responses,
Mhm.
and I feel like they should be aware of this.
Yeah.
Um, and and I think it's definitely, I get where the concern comes, and they don't
Mhm.
necessarily know your full medical history or know how long you've been on creatine, and
Yeah.
so sometimes just coming off of it for a minute and getting a good normalized baseline just
Mhm.
to make sure that everything is where it should be is a good
Yeah.
idea.
Very
So,
cool. Thank
what do you recommend looking for a good product of creatine? Obviously, we know Gnarly offers it. So, like, what are we looking at for as far as ingredients, and then what kind of dosage should we be doing? I know that there's loading and also just the average, daily amount that you're taking, depending, I guess, for the reasons. I know that bodybuilders use it, and load with it, but
Yeah, so in terms of creatine, creatine monohydrate is the most researched form of creatine you can take. There are a bunch of different, I think there's like a creatine ethyl ester out there. There are some other forms that are purporting to be better absorbed. Creatine monohydrate is absorbed extremely well by the body. And so that is primarily what I would suggest looking for. There, once again, getting buying creatine that's third-party tested, just to make sure that one, what you're taking is actually creatine, so that we're getting label claim testing, and two, to make sure that there's no contamination. Because this is used in the bodybuilding world a lot, Lindsay, this could also be a category of product where you could potentially see contamination. So
let's be aware.
I definitely would say third-party certified creatine monohydrate. You'll find other ingredients in creatine products that purport to be like synergistic, but really, I think for the benefits that we talked about, just looking for a straight up creatine is great. I'll plant this, but we're coming out with like a flavored creatine later this year. Some folks like adding, so we obviously, our creatine is unflavored, and adding it to a smoothie is wonderful, but other people like drinking it on its own. And so having a little bit of light flavoring in there can be a great thing. But yeah, it's a pretty simple product, and I think using it as a standalone is great. As far as dosage, so I think starting out for most people, if you've never taken creatine before, starting at a maintenance dose is a good idea. So typically the maintenance dose most often thrown around is 5 grams of creatine per day. In reality, if we want to get, weight-based with it, which is always a good idea, because as we discussed, in terms of glycogen storage, different body sizes have different amounts of muscle. The maintenance dose for creatine is 0.03 grams per kilo of body weight per day. Once again, convert your pound body weight into kilos by dividing by 2.2, and then you would multiply that number by 0.03 to get your maintenance dose.
Ooh, that's good information.
Yeah. So for that maintenance dose, right, we talked about kind of our baseline levels of creatine, which can be impacted by diet, can also be impacted by the amount of muscle you have on your body. So often I'll hear people say, women have X percentage lower creatine stores than males. Well, that's true, but that's also true because women often have lower muscle mass than males. So once again, you have to take the body size out of it to really look. And when you take body size out of it, there's no difference, right? So it's not a gender difference, it's a body size difference. That's where using the body weight based dose is recommended. But if you are consuming that maintenance dose and you're an omnivore, it's going to take about 3 weeks to get from your baseline 60% creatine, muscular creatine stores to our 100% saturated muscular creatine stores. So it's going to take a little bit of time for you to see also that benefit that you might feel when you're lifting, when you start to see PRs on your squat or PRs on your bench press. The loading phase or loading of creatine is a way to shorten that window. And so loading is simply taking in more creatine for a short period of time before dropping onto the maintenance. So the loading phase is typically people will take 20 grams of creatine per day. But once again, I recommend using weight-based dosing. So 0.3 grams of creatine per kilo of body weight. So the maintenance dose is 0.03 and the loading phase dose is 0.3. And when we were talking about this a little bit before you guys started recording, but whenever you're taking higher amounts of creatine can cause some gut distress. And so it's recommended that you separate that higher dose of creatine into smaller doses over the course of the day. So for just an example, let's say that your loading phase of creatine was in fact 20 grams of creatine. You would take that 20 grams and you would divide it into 4 5-gram doses separated by about 3 to 4 hours. And that would minimize the likelihood of causing any gut distress.
Got it.
So I think I'd like to, we need to wrap up, but I mean, we could talk about this all day, but I do want to touch on the piece of creatine for our cognitive health.
Yep.
And also just kind of touching on some of the research that I've heard about for people that are doing some of these big races, like the 200s or whatever, and helping with the sleep deprivation. I don't know if have heard or read anything about that. So just a little bit about those two pieces before we wrap up.
Yeah, so most of the cognitive benefits of creatine, I tend to think of it in three different classes. So there's the cognitive function. That research has been done primarily under stressful situations. So it kind of overlaps with your last question. And that primary stress situation is sleep deprivation. So often I'll hear people just kind of say, oh, it's good for your brain. And it might be, but the research isn't 100% there yet. Most of that research has been done in the elderly. And in those that are extremely sleep deprived. And in those cases, yes, it does help with cognitive function. So it's not going to hurt you, but it may not necessarily be like the panacea that people are making it out to be. There's also good research showing that creatine can help with traumatic brain injury. So either taking it in the case that, for instance, for folks that are into fighting, or for folks that are into sports where concussion is likely, taking it preventatively, but then also taking it if you have experienced like a traumatic brain injury, like a concussion, to help with recovery from that. And then the third class of brain health that I think is really interesting is research looking into the benefit of creatine for those that have depressive symptoms or post-traumatic stress disorder. So creatine has been shown to be helpful in both of those cases. In the case of depression, it's been helpful in addition to depressive medication that people are in. So not recommending that you take creatine instead of medication that your doctors have prescribed to you, but there is some research showing that taking it alongside depressive medication can actually improve depressive symptoms. And the same thing has been shown in PTSD. So creatine helps with energy transfer in the brain. And the three things that we just talked about are all things that where energy transfer is not happening as it should.
Awesome. So many fascinating things, so many nuggets in this that people can take away. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
I don't know about our audience, but I'm pretty sold on Gnarly because Shannon is the CEO and she is super knowledgeable. I could just listen and learn from you all day long. And I want somebody who's making my product that knows the reasons why behind it, the science. And you definitely clearly have that taken care of. So where can people find your product?
Yeah, so you can find us at gonarly.com. We just redesigned our website. It's faster and zippier and easy to navigate. So come check that out. You can follow along. We post a lot of really good educational material on our social media site. NARFAX is what we call it, but we're at Gnarly Nutrition. We've done a number of posts on creatine, one that includes some of the per body weight dosages that I just talked about. And then you can find us on Amazon and then in retailers. So we have select products in REI across the nation, and then in retailers in cities near you. If we are not in your favorite retailer, please shoot me an email. Tell the store manager that they need to carry Gnarly and send us an email and let us know that you want to see us in that store, and we'll get in contact with them.
Awesome. Thank you
I didn't know you
much.
were in REIs. That's a new fact. And now I need to get you in my local running store.
Yeah, it's been about a year that we've been in REI. So not the full product line, but Hydrate is in there, our whey protein, our vegan protein, collagen, and our greens all in stick pack form.
So awesome. Well, again, thanks for coming and thanks everyone for listening. It was nice getting together for a chat.
Yeah, thanks guys.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.